question, will he or won't he be stripped of his Oscar? I refer, of course, to Will Smith, but we turn to other matters. Indeed, we have a Will involved in this, as it happens. We're going to talk about government's bold plans to try and what's called transform outcomes for children and youngsters with special educational needs. The Will in this question is Conservative MP and Children and Families Minister Will Quince, who joins me now. What is the transformation you and your colleagues hope to bring about, Minister? Good morning.
Morning, Nick. Thank you. Pleasure to be on your show. Well, today we're launching our ambitious new plans to transform the outcomes for children and young people with special educational needs and those who are in alternative provision. At its very heart, it's about a real vision for a national SEND system. So it's all about improving outcomes, getting mainstream right, so making sure that mainstream schools are inclusive, investing in our workforce, importantly, aligning education, health and care systems, and making sure that parents have confidence by strengthening accountability and redress mechanisms within the system. And we're now launching a 13-week consultation. And I'm really keen for as many children and young people with SEND, their parents, carers, and all those who work within the system and across education to get involved and help us to shape this plan.
As we finish our conversation, I'll ask for a website or how people get involved. But by the use of the word transform, Minister, I think it's fair to say that you're not particularly satisfied with how it is at the moment then. What isn't working that should be working in your view?
Well, in truth, Nick, it's quite a long list. The outcomes for children and young people with special education needs isn't good enough. We're letting too many children down. Parents don't have confidence in the system. There's a postcode lottery. We're investing huge amounts of money, Nick. So next year we're spending over £9 billion. But it's my job to make sure that that's spent effectively and that every child, regardless of the challenge that they face, receives a world-class education. And look, the best thing about this job is I get to spend a lot of time with children and young people, and particularly children and young people with special educational needs. And they have exactly the same hopes, aspirations and dreams as any other child. It's my job, it's our job as a government to help them realise that potential.
Appreciating you're new to the brief, Minister, but the Conservatives have in one shape or form been in power for more than a decade. Why has the situation been allowed to deteriorate on their watch?
It's a really fair question, Nick, and we actually had reforms in 2014. They set the right aspiration and ambition, but in truth, the delivery and implementation just wasn't up to standard. So what we've done this time, apart from me keeping a real watchful eye and brief on the actual delivery of these new proposals, we're investing an extra £70 million. That's over and above the extra £1 billion we're putting into the high needs budget next year. £70 million for implementation, a new national system. So we're going to have a real laser-like Hawkeye focus at a national level, but also regional and local level to make sure that what our policy intent is nationally is actually being delivered at grassroots, and both parents are getting they're more confident about the system, but most importantly, that we have better outcomes for children and young people.
And talking of those outcomes, Minister, I'm sure you'd be with me first to salute the British people with the generosity they're showing to Ukrainian families and by taking them in. But there's a fair chance some of those youngsters will have special needs of some sort, whether educational needs, emotional needs. They may have suffered unspeakable trauma as their homes, even possibly some of their loved ones, have been blown up by Putin. Can you tell me there's going to be extra support for those children coming into the country?
Yeah, there certainly is, Nick. So far under the two schemes, and the first scheme, which is the family scheme, there's been 23,000 people, 8,000 of whom are children. I'm keeping a really watchful eye on that, understandably. So local authorities per individual, a child gets £10,000, and then over and above that, an extra £9,000. And through with our Secretary of State, we've secured additional places for up to 100,000 children. So we stand ready to help. But you're right, Nick. We don't exactly know the trauma that some of these young people have faced. Some will have special education needs. It's my job to make sure that we give them the best possible chance and fresh start.
A little bit out of your brief, but you are the minister on parade, as it were, Minister. The suggestion that Roman Abramovich, coming back to the Ukraine story, could have been poisoned at peace talks. Do you have any more intel from British security services on that? And what might this tell us about Russia's ambitions?
So I don't, Nick, and I read that story too, and no doubt the government will be wanting to establish the facts. But look, it's hard for anyone to see the images coming out of Ukraine and not just desperately hope and pray for peace. And although there's a huge amount of scepticism about whether these talks will be successful, we have to hope for the best. There are over 7.5 million children in Ukraine, Nick, and my thoughts are with them. They're often the hidden victims of conflicts of this nature. So I very much hope for peace, but only on terms that are acceptable to President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people.
One other front page story, Minister, the so-called Partygate fines could be issued today or certainly sometime this week. Do you imagine that will be the end to that story now and everyone can get on with their respective lives?
Well, look, Nick, it is a serious issue. It's one we take seriously. You'll have noticed there have been considerable changes at Downing Street. I completely understand the public interest, the considerable upset that's been caused. My constituents have written to me in reasonable number too. But you'll appreciate, given the ongoing Metropolitan Police investigation, it looks like it may be concluding relatively soon. It wouldn't really be appropriate for me to comment further.
All right, one last question, reminding listeners, of course, you are Children's Minister and Families Minister. Your colleague Nadim Zahawi, speaking yesterday, says that pupils should be taught about the benefits of the British Empire. Do you concur?
Well, I think it's really important that our curriculum across the whole range of key stages ensures that we're teaching about the facts. And
what were the facts of the British Empire? Good, bad, or somewhere in the middle?
I think, in truth, Nick, it's a bit of both, and depending on the context. And I think the key here is that we teach children the facts and we let them make informed decisions. It's not about us giving a bias or particular slanted view either way. Children are brilliant, and they do form their own view. That's what we want in this country. But it's important that you give them both sides and let them make an informed decision.
Grateful for your time today. Conservative MP, Children and Families Minister Will Quince appearing here on LBC, where the time is 3 minutes before 8. Let's get at least one more call in. This is a different Will Smith. Should he, or should he not, retain his Oscar? Zara is in Port Talbot. What do you say, Zara? Good morning.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Ferrari. Thanks for having me on.
Hi, Zara.
First of all, straight off the bat, I'd say yes, he should retain it because he earned it. However, I do think there's things that haven't been discussed, such as when he was 13, I read his book recently, and he says when he was 13, he watched his mother get quite brutally beaten by his father.
Yes.
And he always felt like